Sarah Mitchell had always valued peace and simplicity. Her life revolved around caring for others, both at work as a dedicated nurse and at home, where she tended to the modest cottage her parents had left her. Nestled on the outskirts of the Oak Ridge neighborhood, her home was small but charming, with a flower-filled garden, a white picket fence, and the faint scent of her mother's rose bushes drifting through the air. It was a sanctuary, a place where Sarah could step away from the chaos of the hospital and find comfort in memories of her parents. Her brother, David Mitchell, the city's chief of police, often visited on weekends, enjoying the calm contrast to his high-stress career. David admired how Sarah managed her home and life with such quiet resilience, never letting the persistent pressures of daily life disturb her composure. He knew, however, that their peaceful existence was about to face an unforeseen challenge, one that would test both their courage and their bonds. Unbeknownst to Sarah, Karen Thornton, the self-appointed watchdog of Oak Ridge and president of the HOA, had been keeping a meticulous eye on her property. Karen was notorious in the community for her obsession with perfection. Lawns needed to be perfectly trimmed, fences painted in the correct shade, and every mailbox aligned to the inch. Sarah's refusal to join the HOA or comply with Karen's unofficial mandates had already made her a target. Karen's irritation grew quietly at first, manifesting in passive-aggressive notes about inconsistencies in her landscaping. Sarah, ever polite, ignored them, hoping reason would prevail. For months, Sarah believed that her distance from the HOA's jurisdiction would protect her. After all, her property technically lay just outside the neighborhood boundaries, beyond the reach of most HOA rules. She continued her life in the quiet, nurturing way she always had, tending her garden, volunteering at local clinics, and enjoying occasional visits from David, who brought news of the city and updates from his police work. Their conversations often drifted from lighthearted anecdotes to deeper discussions about justice, ethics, and family responsibilities, a subtle reminder of David's role in maintaining order in the wider world. Little did Sarah know, Karen's obsession with control had escalated beyond simple notes or verbal complaints. Karen's desire to enforce perfection had turned into a dangerous plan, one that would soon threaten not just a house, but the very foundation of Sarah's life. The quiet, peaceful days that Sarah and David cherished were about to be shattered, and the calm before the storm was the last moment they would experience freedom from the chaos that was rapidly approaching. Karen Thornton had always seen herself as the ultimate authority in Oak Ridge. As president of the HOA, she wielded her influence like a weapon, often blurring the lines between rules and personal vendettas. For months, Sarah Mitchell had been a thorn in her side, not by choice, but simply by existing outside the HOA's direct control. Karen's obsession with neighborhood perfection had evolved into an almost personal mission. Sarah's modest cottage, with its uneven flower beds and weathered fence, was an affront to the image Karen wanted to project. At first, Karen's tactics were subtle. She left increasingly aggressive notes on Sarah's porch, citing obscure rules that didn't even apply to her property. "Your mailbox must conform to Oak Ridge standards," one note read. Another warned that the lawn needed immediate correction or face legal consequences. Sarah, ever patient, responded with polite letters explaining that her property was outside the HOA's jurisdiction and that she intended no harm to the neighborhood's aesthetic. But Karen's determination only intensified. Then, the HOA began circulating rumors about an impending expansion of their authority, claiming they were adopting new guidelines that would bring Sarah's property under their control. Karen's eyes gleamed with the thrill of absolute power. To her, this was an opportunity to set an example. She convened the board behind closed doors, painting Sarah's home as an illegal eyesore threatening the community's values. She proposed a radical solution: demolish the cottage entirely. Some board members hesitated, questioning the legality, but Karen's charisma and relentless pressure won them over. By the time Sarah finished her next night shift at the hospital, the board had approved a demolition order, completely unauthorized by the city and entirely illegal. That night, Karen coordinated with a local construction crew, spinning a web of lies about city approval and zoning compliance. The workers, unaware that they were participating in a criminal act, prepared bulldozers and demolition equipment, instructed to remove the house as soon as possible. Karen, brimming with self-righteous certainty, envisioned the final scene: Sarah standing helpless while her beloved home disappeared. Meanwhile, Sarah returned home in the early hours, unaware of the storm about to hit. She parked her car, adjusted her mask from a long night at the hospital, and stepped into the quiet of her yard. The usual comfort of her surroundings felt slightly off, but she shrugged it off, attributing it to exhaustion. Little did she know, by morning, her sanctuary would be gone. Karen's unchecked ambition, driven by arrogance and obsession, had crossed every legal and moral boundary imaginable. The peaceful life Sarah had worked so hard to maintain was about to vanish under the steel jaws of a bulldozer. The first rays of dawn had barely touched Oakridge when Sarah Mitchell returned from her night shift, exhausted but content in the thought of finally resting at home. She had imagined the quiet comfort of her cottage, the smell of roses drifting from the garden, the familiar creak of the front porch, and the soft hum of life around her little sanctuary. Instead, she was met with a sight so jarring it felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath her feet. Where her cottage once stood, a gaping expanse of rubble stretched across the yard. Wood splintered, bricks scattered, and the remnants of her parents' cherished belongings poked out from beneath piles of debris. The rose bushes she had nurtured for years were flattened, crushed under the weight of unforgiving machinery. Sarah stumbled backward, her hands trembling, a scream caught in her throat. She looked around desperately, seeing neighbors gathering cautiously at the edges of the street, their faces a mixture of shock and pity. Karen Thornton appeared almost immediately, striding confidently toward Sarah as if her actions were entirely justified. "I'm just enforcing the standards of the neighborhood," Karen declared, her tone smug and unrepentant. "Rules are rules, and you chose not to follow them." Her words, meant to intimidate, instead sent a chilling realization through Sarah. Karen had gone further than anyone could have imagined, committing a crime with brazen arrogance. With a shaky voice, Sarah dialed her brother, David Mitchell, trying to summon any hope amidst the devastation. Within minutes, David arrived, stepping out of his car with a measured calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos around him. At first, he wore casual clothing, his identity as police chief hidden beneath a coat and a baseball cap. He surveyed the destruction quietly, his gaze steady, taking in every detail: the flattened garden, the destroyed fence, and the undeniable evidence of illegal activity. Karen, oblivious to David's true identity, began lecturing him, repeating her justifications for the demolition. "You must understand," she insisted, "I'm protecting the community. We had to act." But David's presence alone radiated authority, and a subtle shift occurred in the gathering crowd. Whispers spread about the man observing the scene with unyielding focus. Karen's confidence wavered slightly, though she had no idea she was now standing in front of the city's top law enforcement officer, someone who would not tolerate injustice, especially against family. In that moment, the calm before the storm shattered completely. Sarah's grief, Karen's arrogance, and the silent power of David converged. The next steps would not be polite letters or passive complaints. The law itself had arrived at her doorstep. Karen's miscalculation had just set the stage for her reckoning, and the destruction she so proudly orchestrated was about to become the catalyst for her downfall. Karen Thornton's smug confidence began to crack the moment David Mitchell revealed his badge. The simple, authoritative display of law enforcement instantly shifted the atmosphere. Neighbors who had been quietly watching exchanged knowing glances. The aura of invincibility Karen had cultivated over the years faltered in an instant. The self-assured HOA president, who had orchestrated the illegal demolition of Sarah's home, suddenly realized she had misjudged the situation immensely. David's approach was calm, precise, and deliberate. He immediately ordered the construction crew to step away from the rubble, ensuring that no further damage occurred. The crew, previously convinced they were acting under legal authority, complied without hesitation. Within minutes, David's officers arrived on the scene, along with city inspectors, ready to document the destruction. Every detail of the demolition, every torn plank and displaced brick, would serve as evidence against Karen and the HOA board. Karen attempted to justify her actions, raising her voice and insisting she had proper approval from the HOA. But David, with an unwavering calm, demanded documentation. When she produced forged or incomplete papers, the gravity of her situation became undeniable. Emails, texts, and messages from the HOA board, previously thought private, were now scrutinized in the light of legality. The evidence painted a clear picture. Karen had knowingly orchestrated the destruction of private property without authorization, lying to both the construction crew and the HOA board to achieve her personal vision of perfection. Neighbors, once silent onlookers, now offered testimony to Karen's repeated threats, aggressive notes, and obsession with control. Cameras from surrounding homes had captured the bulldozer at work, cementing the timeline of Karen's crime. Every claim she had made crumbled under the weight of irrefutable proof. The scale of her arrogance became painfully obvious, and for the first time, Karen experienced the fear and helplessness she had inflicted on others for so long. David, while acting decisively, maintained professionalism, carefully balancing justice with restraint. He explained to Sarah that she would receive full support from the city and the legal system, and that Karen's actions constituted multiple felony charges, including criminal trespass, property destruction, and abuse of authority. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for a lifeline, but there was none. The web of lies she had spun had ensnared her entirely, and there was no escaping accountability. In the quiet aftermath of the initial confrontation, David ensured Sarah's immediate safety, arranging for temporary housing and securing the property from further interference. Karen, stripped of her illusion of power, now faced the full consequences of her recklessness. The aftermath of the illegal demolition sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge. Karen Thornton, once a figure of local authority and feared by neighbors, was now facing the full weight of the law. Arrested and charged with multiple felonies, including criminal trespass, property destruction, and falsification of documents, she was forced to confront the consequences of her arrogance. The entire HOA board, complicit in her schemes, scrambled to distance themselves, but the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, texts, and video footage left no room for denial. The neighborhood that had once trembled at Karen's commands now watched as her power crumbled publicly and irrevocably. For Sarah Mitchell, the ordeal was both devastating and, ultimately, affirming. Though she had lost her home, the support of her brother David and the legal system offered a path to restoration. David ensured that Sarah received a full civil settlement, covering the costs to rebuild her cottage exactly as it had been, preserving the memory of her parents and the sanctuary she had always cherished. The reconstruction became a symbol not just of resilience but of triumph over unchecked authority. As the walls rose and the garden bloomed again, Sarah felt a profound sense of justice, not only for herself but for anyone who had suffered under Karen's oppressive reign. David's role in the case cemented his reputation as a leader who balanced authority with integrity. While many knew him as the chief of police, his decisive handling of this deeply personal situation demonstrated that his commitment to justice extended beyond the badge. It was personal, moral, and unwavering. Neighbors who had once feared the HOA now rallied around the Mitchells, recognizing the importance of vigilance and community accountability. Karen's downfall prompted reforms within Oak Ridge, including stricter oversight of HOA powers, clear boundaries for enforcement, and mandatory checks to prevent any individual from wielding unchecked authority. In the months that followed, the story of Sarah's destroyed and rebuilt home spread throughout the county, inspiring other communities to examine the limits of HOAs and the rights of homeowners. Karen Thornton became a cautionary tale, her name synonymous with corruption, arrogance, and the dangers of letting personal obsession override legality. Meanwhile, Sarah and David found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served, and their family's bond had only strengthened through adversity. As Sarah stood in her fully restored garden, watching the sun rise over her home, she reflected on the ordeal. What had begun as a peaceful life had been threatened by greed and obsession, but through courage, law, and resilience, the Mitchells had emerged stronger. The rebuilt cottage was more than bricks and mortar, it was a testament to justice, family, and the certainty that those who abuse power will eventually face the consequences.